Okay, guys, hear me out. I have a new mind-blowing theory, because of course I do. So we all know how Clotho works in the library, but in mythology she's the spinner of fates. So I kind of allude to the fact that she is the same person in the ACOTAR universe, and how she kind of knows, like, about their mate bonds and stuff. But then I was thinking, who are the other two fates? The allotter of destiny and the person who is like the fate of death. So then I was thinking, Mama Archeron could be Lachesis, the allotter of destiny, and Amarantha, whose Roman name is Morta, could be the fate of death. Because if you think about it, if Mama Archeron poisoned herself, like, she knew how destiny was going to play out, so she had to die for Papa Archeron to wager his money, for them to be poor, for Feyre to go hunting, for then to her kill Andrus, and to start this whole process of everything that just went down as someone who would, know what destiny had to offer. And I think the biggest clue of that is when she told Feyre to stay together with her sisters, when she was the one who apparently wanted the older two to be married off. That never made any sense to me, and now it's totally clicking right now. Which means the grandmother was the goddess Nyx, which Feyre's son is literally named after. Like, how would she not know her grandmother's actual name? Because she didn't know she was an actual goddess. And if that's true, and Mama Archeron was a Morai or like a half-breed, and then Papa Archeron was also a half-breed, that would make the girls 25% Fey, which means they would have mortal lifespans, but also they would have high resistance to ailments, like the regular Fae. And who is Morta? As I said, Amarantha, the fate of death. She was, like, horrible. She loved death. And I think that when she died, Nesta got her power, her Moray power of death, of being the person to cast death upon people. And I think Elaine got Mama Archerons of destiny. And obviously, since Clotho is still alive, she's technically their aunt, which would be pretty cool. And the Moray also had a brother, Thanatos, and there's a Lord Thanatos in Hewn City right now. And another little aside, the goddess Nyx actually had children, including the Moray, the Fates, with the god Erebus, whose name means night. And we don't know who Mama Archeron's father was, but it would make sense that he was part of, like, the very first royal family of the Night Court or something. And we already know that the Fae used to crossbreed, well, not really crossbreed, but they used to, like, rape mortals to create crossbreed babies to become more slaves. There is no way that the parents weren't secretly changing out their kids in the mortal realm, like changelings. So Papa Archeron could have been a changeling, which is why I think he was also half Fae. And another thing, Mama Archeron was the one who supposedly had cousins on the continent. Of course she would have cousins on the continent. Can you imagine how many children the gods had? Pfft. And another thing, and I know a lot of people will probably be like, oh, well, if the girls were part god and part fae, they wouldn't be any mortal. But that's not true. Because first of all, if Papa Archeron was a changeling and he's only half Fae, that would make him half mortal. If Mama Archeron was like a god, literally the god of destiny, she could have made sure her children were mostly mortal. Like, they're gods. It's literally their job to tell people who to be. And another question people might bring up is, if they were going to end up in Prythian anyway, how come Mama Archeron didn't make them Fae when they were born? Because they were born in the mortal lands. Prythian, as they knew it, was like evil and all this stuff. And they lived in the mortal lands. Mortals hate Fae. So not only would they be targeted if they were outed as Fae or gods, etc., but their children would be. So it would make no sense to make them Fae when they would just be targeted to begin with, instead of becoming Fae through their own destiny, which Mama Archeron could decide. And she seemed kind of like a type A on a power trip, so it makes a lot of sense that she would want to decide after the fact. To me, at least. Next, the goddess, Grandmama Archeron, also was like a goddess of like a ton of terrors. Like death, all of the fates, strife, pain, sleep. Like a lot of bad shit. So obviously that's why she was like an abusive fuck in the series, especially to Nesta. I just thought that was funny. And there's no way to actually kill her. So the fact that they're like, oh, she just died one day. I don't buy it. I don't think she's dead. You can't kill the goddess Nyx. Because you can't kill the night. Like, you can't kill the creator of, like, death and destiny. You just can't. So I think she was just done with whatever job. See through to the end of the job that she had at the moment, which was basically to just make sure that her daughter and grandchildren lived up to their potential, that her daughter placed the right destiny for her grandchildren in order for them to take over for Amarantha and for her daughter when she was done with her job. Or if she actually poisoned herself, we don't know. She might not be dead either. Who knows? I mean, you can't really kill gods, so they could just be like permanently asleep, like we see in some other series, kind of like FBAA. So that's a thing. I don't know. What do you guys think about Mama and Grandmama being gods, Nyx and Lachesis? So you know how, like, Amarantha was Hybern's best general, and she, like, death surrounded her, and I believe that she was the allotter of death and the destiny of death and all of that? So if she is Mama Archeron's sister, and Grandmama Archeron is Nyx, the goddess of night, who would be their actual mother, Amarantha's and Mama Archeron's and Clotho's mother, we didn't know who the father was. Duh! Fucking Hybern is the grandfather. Why do you think he had the sisters dragged into the cauldron to be turned fae and given a longer lifespan? Like, he was evil, obviously, but he was their grandfather. That makes so much sense, because he says, like, why did you think I asked my dear friend Ianthe who fair Archeron would like to have with her for an eternity? Just like his daughters, the three fates. They were separated. Because Amarantha was on Hybern. Clotho was hidden in the Night Court, because I believe Amarantha is actually the one that tried to kill her to take her power. But that's another thing. And Mama Archeron was in the human lands. And this totally tracks, Because in book 1, the thing that I always found was weird that I mentioned before is that when Mama Archeron was dying, she told Feyre to stay together with her sisters because she knew that if they were apart, it would just drive them further and further away from each other. They wouldn't be able to work on their problems, and they would probably not only self-destruct, but destroy everything around them too. Like her and her 2 sisters. And we know that Hybern is the oldest person in Prythian. So I think that since they don't really know what happened to the old gods, they basically said that, oh, they disappeared one day. I don't think that's true. I think they made themselves look fey. And Hybern was one of those old gods, and Grandmama Archeron was the goddess Nyx. I think Hybern is the god Erebus, which literally means darkness. And he was literally the darkness that hung over the land because he was like another blight, kind of like Amarantha. And him killing Papa Archeron could be kind of like Baron killing Jasminda. If his daughter was Mama Archeron and she was a Murray, or like a kind of like a princess goddess, I don't know what you would really call them, and she married a half-breed, half-mortal, half-fae, and Hybern hated mortals, so much so that he used to have mortal slaves and fought a war for mortal slaves, he absolutely would kill Papa Archeron at the first sight of him, which is what he did in the war. He killed Papa Archeron in front of Nesta, his granddaughter, who is also now the Queen of Death. Just like his daughter Amarantha was. Amarantha was just like her father, Hybern, in her quest for power. She would destroy anyone and anything to get what she wanted, which was, again, ultimately power. And how do you think that she knew where Hybern's, spellbook was? She was only a general. If they weren't closer than just, king in general, I don't think she would have known where he even kept it, because that would have been very irresponsible of him. And, not only that, but Hybern was basically crazy in his quest for power as well, which is why he went after Feyre at first. The whole meaning for Tamlin shielding her in the manor was because Hybern wanted to kidnap her for being maid, so he could probably take all of the powers from the High Lords that was inside of her, and that way their powers wouldn't be able to affect him, so he could ultimately do what he wanted, which was to take over Prythian. And that's what Amarantha wanted too. She wanted to take over Prythian. Whether it was for Hybern or against Hybern, I think at the end she was against him, because we got that line in ACOTAR. I forget who said it, but I think it was the Adder, actually, who mentions that she basically stole the spells from him. And he was, annoyed, but not annoyed enough to, correct her behavior of trying to take over Prythian at the time. Because ultimately, I think he was very egotistical and obviously power hungry. And I think that he probably didn't see Amarantha as a threat to himself, especially if he was actually a god. And if she was his daughter, he probably could have just offed her whenever he wanted to, but it was more like she was more like a little fly in his ear, an annoyance, rather than anyone who would hinder his plans for power. Unlike all of the courts once they had actually killed Amarantha and were free of her blight. I think that's when he realized, her being power hungry like him kind of helped him in the long run, because he had a lot more time to plan. Anyway, I'm rambling. But to recap, Hybern is the Archeron grandfather and the god Erebus. The goddess Nyx is Grandmama Archeron. The 3 Marae, or the three fates of mythology, were the spinner, which is Clotho, the youngest, Lachesis, who was the middle child, who was Mama Archeron, and Atropro, aka Morta, who was the oldest, which was Amarantha. And the Archeron sisters are 25% Fae and 25% God and half mortal, or at least glamored or forced to be half mortal because of, their mother being the literal spinner of destiny. And then all of this stuff happened as they had planned for probably thousands of years. I don't really know if Mama Archeron loved Papa Archeron, nor do I know why she would marry a crossbreed if he is half Fae, which I believe he is, especially if her father, aka Hybern, hated mortals. But again, it goes to show that the sisters probably hated their father. The Mama Archeron and Clotho and Amarantha probably hated Hybern, their father, just because it seems like everything they did kind of went against him, at least Amarantha and Mama Archeron. Her for marrying a half-mortal, and Amarantha for stealing his spells from under him and trying to take over Prythian when that was basically his plan. And not for nothing, but I think the only reason Hybern was actually killed is because his manner of death not only was just being stabbed through the throat, because that really wouldn't kill a god, but I think it was because it was specifically truth teller. We know that there's all these magical enchanted knives out there that could kill gods, like Gwydion and Nesta made Ataraxia, and there's always this big thing surrounding truth teller and how he calls it truth teller and how it's never failed him and all of this stuff. And I think it's probably because truth teller is one of those spelled knives that can actually kill a god. And so that's why they were successful in killing the King of Hybern, aka the god Erebus. As for Grandmama Archeron, she might not be dead. The goddess Nyx, she might not be dead. We don't know. She could have taken another form. Same with Mama Archeron. She could have faked her death just to start all of this destiny stuff. So either of them could still be alive because they're technically gods. But yeah, and I mentioned earlier that I think Amarantha was the one who actually harmed Clotho instead of random males, because it just makes more sense that the sisters would eventually turn against each other. And since Clotho was hidden in Valaris in the library, and Amarantha had no knowledge of Valaris and it was shielded, she couldn't find her to finish the job. And actually, I think Grandmama Archeron, or Nyx, is probably still alive somewhere in another form. Mama Archeron, I believe, we know she technically died of typhus, which is kind of random. But I think she was either dosed or she took it herself, but I think it was some sort of spell or potion to put her to sleep. As a god, we know that the gods can just, take cat naps for millennia. And I think if she was asleep, her power would be awakened in, like I said, Elaine. Because I think only one of them could probably tap into the power at once. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed all of that. I know I'm not the best speaker. I'm much better at typing out my thoughts than I am actually verbalizing them, because when I'm actually trying to talk, I tend to forget words because my mind is going faster than my mouth. But yeah, I'm sure there will be something else that I forget the minute I post that video, but For now, this is all.